The most fundamental need of humanity is the gospel.
Yes.
And so whatever we're going to do to reach our community, we've got to have the gospel at the tip of the spear. How can the leaders, the elders, help the church more authentically reflect the community?
Yeah.
To me, the first thing the church leadership has got to get committed to is preaching the gospel.
Yes.
And bringing the gospel to that community. Too many evangelical churches are content with social programs. They're content with backpack programs, with starting kids sports programs, with doing foster care ministry. All of those things can have their place. They can all be good. But what will it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? The fundamental need, the most fundamental need of humanity is the gospel.
Yes.
And so whatever we're going to do to reach our community, we've got to have the gospel at the tip of the spear. Yes.
We cannot trade the gospel for a backpack program.
Yeah.
We cannot trade the gospel for multiculturalism. We can't. It doesn't work. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis's First Things quote, and I always butcher it, but he says something to the effect of, when you take the first thing, the thing that should be number one, and you make it a number two, you will lose the first and the second thing.
Yeah.
You cannot take what is supposed to be most important and put it in a second position, or go after the second thing so strongly that you think it is of primary importance.
Yes.
Because you'll lose both things.
So gospel focus must be first.
Yes.
And then the question is how are we as leadership going to mobilize our congregation to engage in this gospel ministry?
Yes.
What kind of discipleship do we need to start engaging in? Let's get a 3 to 5 year strategic plan together.
Mm-hmm.
What are our tangible goals? How are we going to train our own congregants to be able to share the gospel with their 8 to 15 people in their life?
Does your congregation know the gospel?
Yeah.
And this is a legit question. When we have statistics that show that many grown Americans, adult Americans, have such a poor or low biblical literacy, asking the question of, does my congregation actually know what the gospel is and what it means and how to communicate that, is a question that every pastor should be asking.
Yeah. So I think that that's a big refocus that a lot of churches need to have is, all right, we're going to reach our community. We're going to start a backpack program. No, we're going to reach our community. We're all going to get mobilized on what is the gospel and how do I share it?
Yeah.
And then thinking about how am I going to communicate and disciple my congregants into that vision.
Mm-hmm.
So first all the elders get on the same page. Then they develop a strategic plan, how we're going to get our congregation on that same page. And we're all going to have a biblical vision for how we're going to bring the gospel to our community. And then thinking of, all right, how are we going to reach these people that are right around our church? There might be even people in your church that you have to reach with the gospel. Mm-hmm. There might be people that are just coming to your church thinking they're a Christian, but there hasn't been a real gospel presentation in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to get clear about that.
Ooh.
But we also don't want to fall into the trap of making this just about reaching diversity goals.
And that is exactly where I wanted to go. And what I was going to say is that, I know that some people might hear this and say, 3 to 5 years, man, we'll never be diverse. That's a lot of steps. I don't know if we need to take that many steps to get diverse. You're missing the point. Diversity for the sake of diversity isn't the goal. The gospel is the goal. That's the goal. Diversity happens when the gospel goes out. Now, if you are looking at the 2 to 5 miles around your church, and if the 2 to 5 miles around your church are mono-ethnic, then you deal with what you have, and you understand the diversity also means so much more than just ethnic diversity.
Yeah.
We were at a church last year, and the surrounding area around this church, 2 to 5 miles, was an income of about $100,000 per home.
It's like
$120,000
$120,000 a year,
$120,000
according to the census data.
Yeah, according to the census. And when we got there, I was like, check, the census is correct. And so but that's fine. I'm not here to judge your socioeconomic status. But this church also, in order to be diverse and to reach this diversity goal, then did programs on the other side of town to be able to reach the poor Black and brown kids. That's what you choose to do as your outreach. That's what you choose to do as your outreach. But there was no outreach and community focus on the people right within their neighborhood. And they didn't see it as a mission field because of their income. Now, if I go one step further, there was actually someone, this was in the height of COVID, there was someone who was actually in their church whose car in the middle of COVID broke down, and they didn't have a way to get to church. And they talked about this person as if, well, yeah, she hasn't been here in a while because her car broke down. And it's a very affluent, it was a more affluent area. I'm not gonna say very affluent, but it was a more affluent area. So you don't have buses don't tend to run in affluent areas. Okay, so if you didn't know that buses don't run in affluent areas, usually you can check that out. But this person didn't have a way to get to church. And so I was like, y'all taking your resources all the way 20 miles down the highway to go and reach out to another community, and yet you're missing the people within the 2 to 5 miles around your church. And the person in your church, actually, there's no resource for her to get to church, all because the people around your church are monoethnic and of a certain socioeconomic status. This is what we don't do. This is what we don't do. We stay gospel-centered. We look around our church and we don't judge that the people around our church don't need the gospel. People around our church definitely need.
They might have different needs.
Yeah, but there is a need.
Yeah. So in that community, even though there was a ton of financial affluence, there was still deep spiritual poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't miss a group just because they're affluent or just because they're white or whatever. We cannot make that mistake.
I would challenge people to really consider what your definition of diversity is.
Yeah.
And then get into the Bible and understand how does the scripture define diversity or consider diversity.
Yeah.